The crowd sat in complete silence, the air thick with anticipation. A little girl stood in the center of the competition ring, her small hands curled into fists at her sides. Next to her, a massive German shepherd sat at attention, his sharp eyes locked onto her every movement. The judges, the audience, even the announcer, everyone was watching. No one knew what was about to happen, but the way the girl and her dog shared a quiet understanding sent a ripple of curiosity through the room. She was the youngest competitor in the police dog trials, a showcase of discipline, skill, and intelligence where the best-trained K9s from around the country displayed their abilities. Most of the handlers were seasoned officers, trained professionals who had spent years working with their dogs. But this little girl? She wasn't a police officer. She wasn't even old enough to drive. And yet, she stood there, steady and confident, as if she had been preparing for this moment her whole life. The judges exchanged skeptical glances. Could she really control such a highly trained dog in a high-pressure situation? One of the senior judges, an officer with decades of experience, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Whenever you're ready," he said, his voice carrying across the arena. The girl took a deep breath, then did something unexpected. Something so subtle that if you weren't paying attention, you might have missed it. She gave her dog a secret signal. A flick of her fingers, a shift in her posture. It was quick, almost imperceptible. And that's when everything changed. The dog, who had been sitting still just moments ago, sprang into action with lightning speed. But he didn't just follow the routine. No, what he did next left the entire audience gasping in disbelief. Even the judge who had seen thousands of these competitions before leaned forward, his eyes wide with shock. Because this wasn't just any routine. This was something no one had ever seen before. The dog moved with precision, his muscles coiling and releasing like a spring. In an instant, he dashed forward, weaving through the obstacle course set up in the center of the arena. But something was different. The routine they had expected him to follow, the one every competitor had trained for, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, this dog was moving with purpose, as if following a completely different set of instructions. The judges leaned in, their pens hovering above their score sheets, momentarily forgotten. The crowd murmured in confusion. Had the girl made a mistake? Had she signaled the wrong command? Even the announcer hesitated, unsure of what to say. And then, something even stranger happened. The German shepherd came to a sudden halt near the far end of the ring, his ears twitching, his nose flaring as if he had caught an unfamiliar scent. He turned sharply, his gaze locked onto something, or someone, just outside the designated competition area. His body tensed, every muscle primed for action. The girl, still standing in the middle of the ring, didn't panic. She didn't look confused or afraid. In fact, she looked like she had expected this. She kept her hands at her sides, her posture relaxed but attentive. It was as if she knew exactly what was happening. One of the judges, a tall man with graying hair, leaned toward the microphone in front of him. Handler," he said, his voice edged with uncertainty. "Is this part of your demonstration?" The girl didn't answer. Instead, she gave another tiny, almost invisible signal. A twitch of her fingers. A small tilt of her head. The dog lunged forward. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the powerful German shepherd shot across the ring, his focus locked onto the far side of the audience stands. Security personnel stiffened, their hands instinctively moving toward their radios. The announcer took a step back, his voice cracking as he attempted to keep up with what was happening. This wasn't normal. This wasn't part of the show. But the little girl remained calm, her eyes never leaving her dog. By now, the audience was shifting nervously. Some people turned to follow the dog's line of sight, trying to see what had caught his attention. The judges whispered among themselves, flipping through their notes as if searching for any explanation. And then, as if pulled by some unseen force, one of the officers stationed near the exit started moving. Slowly at first, then faster. His face, which had been neutral just moments ago, was suddenly set with urgency. The girl finally spoke. "He found it." Her voice was soft but carried through the hushed arena like a sudden gust of wind. The head judge furrowed his brows. "Found what?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she simply pointed in the direction where her dog had stopped. The German Shepherd was now standing rigid, his nose close to the ground, his tail straight as a rod. His body language was clear. He had detected something. Something serious. The officer who had moved earlier reached the spot first. He crouched down, his hands carefully inspecting the floor beneath one of the arena seats. A long pause followed. Then, his expression changed. His shoulders tensed, his posture stiffened. He turned sharply, locking eyes with the judge. "We have a situation." The words sent a jolt of electricity through the room. More officers rushed over, some pushing past stunned audience members, their radios crackling to life. The crowd was now in a frenzy, people whispering, some standing up to get a better view. The judges were no longer watching a competition. They were watching something real unfold before their eyes. And through it all, the little girl stood exactly where she had started, her face calm, almost knowing. One of the officers finally turned to her. "How did you know?" The girl glanced at her dog, then back at the officer. "We've been practicing." It was the only answer she gave. And yet, it was enough to make every person in that room realize one thing. This was no ordinary girl, and this was no ordinary dog. But what exactly had they found? What had the dog sensed that no one else had? The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Whatever was happening, one thing was clear. The real test had only just begun. The air inside the arena felt heavier now, thick with a tension no one had expected at a simple competition. The audience murmured in hushed voices, some shifting in their seats, others craning their necks to get a better look at what was happening. The officers surrounding the suspicious spot moved quickly but carefully, their faces set in tight expressions. The little girl still hadn't moved. She stood in the center of the ring, watching as her dog remained perfectly still, nose to the ground, body poised like a coiled spring. He wasn't barking, wasn't growling. He was waiting. Waiting for the next command. Waiting to see what would happen next. One of the officers near the discovery turned to the head judge and muttered something too low for the audience to hear. Whatever it was, it made the judge's face go pale. He turned to the girl, his lips parting slightly as if he was about to say something, but then he hesitated. Because there was something strange about all of this. The way the girl had reacted. The way the dog had gone off script. The way she had known, before anyone else, that something was wrong. The girl's father, a man in his late 30s with a sturdy build and sharp eyes, had been standing near the judge's table the entire time. Now, he took a step forward, his expression unreadable. "This isn't just a game for her," he said quietly. The head judge turned to him. "What do you mean?" "She's been training with police dogs her whole life," the man continued. "Not just for competitions. Real training. Real drills. She knows how they work, how they think. And most importantly," his gaze flickered toward the German Shepherd, "she trusts them more than anyone." The judge swallowed hard, glancing back at the girl. She hadn't taken her eyes off her dog, not once. Meanwhile, the officer at the scene of the disturbance had begun carefully sweeping the area, checking for anything unusual. His partner crouched down next to him, shining a small flashlight under the row of seats. The second officer stiffened. "Something's here." The words sent another wave of unease through the crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably, others murmured in concern. What could possibly be hidden under the stands? And how had the dog sensed it before anyone else? The head judge, now visibly unsettled, turned back to the girl. "How did you know?" She finally looked at him, her expression calm but serious. "I didn't," she admitted. "He did." She nodded toward her dog. I just listened. The officer closest to the seats reached forward carefully, his gloved hand brushing against something small and metallic wedged between the beams. He tugged slightly, then stopped. His jaw clenched. He looked up at his partner, then at the head judge, then at the little girl. We need to evacuate this section immediately. The word sent a ripple of shock through the arena. The security team sprang into action, moving quickly to clear the audience members sitting closest to the scene. Some people hesitated, confused and frightened, while others moved without question, sensing the growing urgency in the officer's movements. And still, through all of it, the little girl remained steady. Her dog hadn't moved an inch, his body still tight with tension. He wasn't scared. He wasn't restless. He was waiting. But for what? The girl's father took another step forward, lowering his voice so only the head judge could hear. You need to listen to her, he said firmly. The judge hesitated, then finally turned to the girl. What do we do? She took a slow breath. Then, at last, she raised her hand, the first deliberate movement she had made since the whole thing began. The audience watched in absolute silence. And then, with a single snap of her fingers, the dog moved again. Faster than anyone could react, he darted forward, not toward the suspicious object, but toward someone standing near the far exit. Someone no one had been paying attention to. A man. He had been standing there quietly, watching everything unfold. But now, as the dog rushed toward him, his entire posture changed. His hand jerked toward his jacket. His face tensed. The officers saw it too. Stop right there, one of them shouted, drawing his weapon. But it was too late. The man turned sharply, bolting for the exit. The German Shepherd didn't hesitate. He launched forward, cutting across the arena floor like a bullet, his muscles stretching with every powerful stride. The crowd gasped, some standing, some frozen in shock. The little girl didn't call out. She didn't flinch. She didn't move. She already knew how this was going to end. And the moment was coming fast. The moment the man bolted, the entire arena seemed to explode into chaos. People gasped, some scrambling to get a better view, while others instinctively backed away, unsure of what was happening. The officers at the scene reacted immediately, shouting commands, but it was the dog, silent, focused, relentless, who moved the fastest. The German Shepherd closed the distance in seconds, his powerful legs carrying him forward like a shadow locked onto its target. The man barely made it past the first row of seats before the dog lunged, his body a blur of motion. The crowd held its breath. But at the very last moment, the man twisted, knocking over a chair in his path. The dog adjusted mid-air, landing smoothly, but the distraction gave the man just enough time to keep running. He shoved past startled audience members, his movements frantic. The officers were closing in now, but he was fast, too fast. If he reached the exit, he could disappear into the chaos outside. And then, the little girl did something no one expected. She stepped forward. Just one step. And she whistled. The sound was sharp, crisp, and carried across the arena like a blade slicing through the noise. The dog responded instantly. His ears perked, his head snapped up, and then he changed course. Instead of chasing straight after the man, he turned, darting toward a different path. One that cut off the escape route completely. The man didn't notice at first. He was too focused on the officers behind him, on the panicked shouts, on the way the crowd had shifted. But then, too late, he saw it. The dog was there, waiting. The German Shepherd stood firm, body tense, teeth bared just enough to send a clear message. The man skidded to a stop, his eyes darting back toward the officers. Trapped. He was trapped. The tension in the room hit its peak. The man's hand twitched toward his jacket. The officers saw it. Their voices overlapped in urgent shouts. Hands where we can see them. Don't move. The dog let out a low, warning growl. The little girl, still standing in the center of the ring, didn't blink. Her hand was steady at her side, fingers curled, as if she was still holding on to the moment, controlling it. The man hesitated, his chest rising and falling with panicked breaths. And then, he moved. But before he could take another step, the German Shepherd lunged. And in that split second, before anyone could react, everything came to a head. The entire arena held its breath. The officers rushed forward. The crowd froze in shock. And the little girl, she never looked away, because she knew this wasn't over yet. The German Shepherd struck like lightning, his powerful body colliding with the man's legs, knocking him off balance. A shocked gasp rippled through the crowd as the man hit the ground hard, his arms flailing. But even as he fell, something was wrong. His hand was still reaching, still moving toward his jacket. The officers saw it too. Their weapons were drawn, shouts overlapping in the air. "Hands where we can see them. Don't do it." But the man wasn't stopping. His fingers curled around something hidden inside his coat. The tension in the room skyrocketed. Then, out of nowhere, the little girl moved. She ran. The audience gasped. The officers turned in alarm. No one had expected this. She sprinted toward her dog, her small frame cutting across the chaos like a flash of light. The German Shepherd, still pinning the man down, sensed her movement instantly. His ears twitched, his body adjusting ever so slightly, ready for whatever came next. And then the man's hand came free. It wasn't what they expected. It wasn't a weapon. It was a small device. A tiny, blinking light flickered from its surface. The moment the officers saw it, everything changed. "Get back!" one of them shouted. The little girl didn't stop. Her dog's body stiffened, his instincts firing off all at once. He let out a sharp bark, not in aggression, but in warning. A warning only the girl seemed to understand. She skidded to a stop just inches away. Her breath was quick, her heart pounding. But she wasn't afraid. The man struggled beneath the dog's weight, his fingers gripping the device like his life depended on it. "No one move," one of the officers commanded. His voice was low, controlled, but there was no mistaking the urgency behind it. "Drop it. Now." The man's eyes darted wildly, calculating, searching for an escape. He was outnumbered, trapped. But he wasn't panicking. And that was the most dangerous part. The little girl, still standing right in front of him, didn't say a word. She just looked at him. Her expression was steady, knowing, like she had already figured something out before anyone else had. The German Shepherd growled again, low and warning. He hadn't moved from his position, hadn't let up on his hold. But he was waiting for her. And then, in the split second before anyone could react, the girl did something completely unexpected. She gave another signal. It was small. A subtle shift of her fingers, barely visible. But the dog caught it instantly. And in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The German Shepherd moved, not to attack, but to disarm. His teeth clamped down on the man's wrist, not with force, but with precision. The man's grip wavered. The officers surged forward. The device slipped from his fingers. And the entire arena seemed to freeze. Because as soon as the device hit the ground, the blinking light stopped. Silence. No one dared to move. The officers stared, their weapons still raised. The audience held their breath. The little girl never looked away. And then, after what felt like an eternity, one of the officers carefully reached down, his gloved hands hovering over the small device. His fingers trembled just slightly as he inspected it. Then, his expression shifted. "This is..." He hesitated, turning it over. Then, finally, he looked up. "It's a fake." The words sent a wave of shock through the room. Murmurs spread instantly. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. The man, pinned beneath the German Shepherd, exhausted, defeated, laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hysterical. But it was enough to send chills down everyone's spine. "Wrong," he muttered. His voice was hoarse, filled with something unreadable. The officers tensed. "What do you mean, wrong?" one of them demanded. The man smirked, tilting his head slightly toward the little girl. His eyes held something eerie, something unsettling. "You're looking in the wrong place." The tension spiked again. The officers stiffened. Some glanced at the stands, others at the exits. The little girl's father, still near the judge's table, suddenly looked alarmed. He turned toward her, his mouth opening to call out. And that's when the lights flickered. For just a second. Barely long enough for most people to notice. But long enough. The girl noticed. Her dog noticed. And in that moment, as the world seemed to slow, the truth finally hit her. The real danger. It wasn't in his hands. It was somewhere else. And they were running out of time. The moment the lights flickered, everything shifted. The officers, the judges, the audience, everyone sensed it, though most didn't understand what it meant. But the little girl did. And so did her dog. She turned sharply, scanning the room, her pulse pounding. The fake device had been a distraction. A trick. Whatever was really happening, it wasn't over. The German Shepherd let out a sharp bark, his head snapping toward the upper level of the arena. The girl followed his gaze, her eyes locking onto a shadow near the lighting rigs. It was barely visible, but she saw it, the shape of a figure moving quickly, trying not to be seen. The real threat was up there. She didn't hesitate. "Up there!" she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. The officers reacted instantly, their heads snapping toward the direction she pointed. One of them, already gripping his radio, barked an order. "We need eyes on the lighting grid now." But the figure was already moving. The audience, still unaware of the full danger, gasped as someone bolted along the catwalk above them. The security team rushed toward the stairwell, pushing past confused spectators. The girl didn't wait. She sprinted forward, her dog at her side, weaving through the chaos. Her father shouted after her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She reached the base of the stairwell just as an officer did. He hesitated for a split second before realizing she wasn't going to back down. He gave a sharp nod. "Stay close." She did. They took the stairs fast, the metal clanging beneath their feet. The German Shepherd led the way, nose high, ears forward, his body tense with focus. Up ahead, the figure reached the far end of the catwalk, fumbling with something near the rigging. The officer shouted, "Stop right there!" The figure turned, just enough for the girl to see his face. It wasn't the same man her dog had tackled earlier. This was someone else. And in his hands, there was another device. Only this time, the light was still blinking. The girl's stomach dropped. The German Shepherd barked, a single, urgent sound. The man's fingers twitched over the device, a look of desperation flashing across his face. He was cornered. The officer took a slow step forward, his voice firm but calm. "Put it down." The man didn't move. His eyes flicked between the officer, the girl, the dog. His breathing was fast, uneven. He was calculating something. The girl felt it before it happened. He wasn't going to surrender. In a flash, he lunged for the rigging, one hand reaching for a release latch. Whatever he was planning, it was happening now. But the girl wasn't about to let it. She didn't think, she just acted. "Now!" she shouted. Her dog launched forward, his powerful body covering the distance in a heartbeat. The man yanked on the latch. Something groaned above them. The catwalk trembled. A set of stage lights jerked forward, their cables straining. The crowd below screamed as metal screeched. And then the dog hit him. The impact knocked the man sideways. His fingers slipped from the device. It clattered onto the catwalk, skidding dangerously close to the edge. The German Shepherd didn't stop. He stayed on him, pinning him down just like before. The officer moved in, securing the man's arms in seconds. But the girl's focus was on the device. It was teetering. One wrong move and it would drop, straight into the audience. She lunged. Her fingers wrapped around it just as it tipped forward. For a second, everything was still. The audience below was silent, breathless. The officers stared. Even the captured man stopped struggling. And then, the blinking stopped. The officer beside her exhaled sharply, carefully taking the device from her hands. His grip was tight, cautious. He studied it for a moment, then let out a sharp laugh, part relief, part disbelief. It's another fake. The girl blinked. What? He shook his head, his face still tense but his eyes lighter. There was never a real threat. It was all staged. Her dog, still standing over the man, let out a low huff, as if he had already known. The officers moved quickly, taking control of the situation. The man was handcuffed, led away under heavy guard. The first suspect, still pinned below, was taken into custody as well. The girl knelt beside her dog, scratching behind his ears. He licked her hand in response, his tail wagging just slightly. Her father appeared beside her, his face pale but full of pride. "You knew," he said softly. "You saw it before anyone else did." She nodded, looking back toward the arena. The crowd was still watching, some whispering, some clapping in stunned admiration. The judges stood frozen, processing everything. She let out a slow breath. It was over. Or at least, that's what she thought. Because as the officers led the suspects away, one of them, just for a moment, looked back at her. And smiled. A knowing, chilling smile. Like this wasn't the end. Like something else had just begun. The girl felt a chill run down her spine as she locked eyes with the man. That smile, it wasn't fear, it wasn't regret. It was something else. Like he knew something no one else did. Like he had already planned for this moment. Her dog let out a soft growl, his body still tense, watching the suspect as he was led away. The officers were talking, securing the scene, making sure the crowd was calm. Her father was beside her, a protective hand on her shoulder. Everything was settling. But that look stayed with her. She let out a slow breath, forcing herself to focus on what mattered. The danger was gone. The real crime was stopped before it could unfold. And the people who had tried to pull it off, whoever they were now in custody. The crowd had started clapping, scattered at first, then stronger. It wasn't just for the officers. It was for her dog, for what they had done together. A judge from the competition stepped forward, still shaken but clearly impressed. "That," he said, shaking his head, "was the most incredible display of teamwork I've ever seen." The girl gave a small smile, reaching down to scratch her dog behind the ears. "He's the real star," she said. The judge chuckled, but there was admiration in his eyes. "That dog is special. But so are you." She felt her father squeeze her shoulder proudly. The officers were still discussing what had happened, trying to piece together all the details. One of them approached her, a kind-looking woman with a steady voice. "We'll need to ask you a few more questions later, but I wanted to say something first." The girl looked up. "You did something today that most adults wouldn't have," the officer said. "You stayed calm. You trusted your instincts. And you trusted your dog. That saved a lot of people." The girl nodded. She wasn't sure what to say. The weight of everything that had happened was finally settling in. The rush, the fear, the quick decisions. All of it. But at the center of it all, there had never been doubt. She had always known, from the moment she had given that first silent signal, that her dog would understand. Her father knelt beside her, resting a hand on her dog's back. "I think we can all agree," he said, glancing at the judge, This competition has a clear winner. The judge laughed, nodding. No doubt about it. It wasn't about the trophy. It never had been. But as they stood there, in the center of the arena, her dog at her side, she felt something stronger than any medal: pride. Not just in what they had done but in what they had proven. They were a team. Always had been. Always would be. As the competition wrapped up and the audience started to clear, an officer approached her father, speaking quietly. She didn't catch all of it, but she heard enough to know that the investigation was far from over. There were still pieces missing, still things to uncover. But that wasn't her job. Her job was to take care of the dog beside her, to listen to him, to trust him, just as he trusted her. As they walked toward the exit, her father placed an arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah." Her dog brushed up against her leg, his warm presence grounding her. She reached down, running her fingers through his fur. And as they stepped outside into the cool evening air, she looked down at him and smiled. "Let's go home."